It's plugged in. Oh, is that it?
Yeah, you're good.
You've got this.
Well, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
And thank you for coming this morning. For those of you watching remotely, you're used to seeing Paul, and he's not here. It still says here, I am Paul, but I am not Paul. He's on a family adventure, so he left his instructions, and we'll just proceed like he is here. We are on Parsha number 31, which is Emor, and which is Hebrew for say. We are in Leviticus 21 through 24, using the English Standard Version, and if you are watching, if you're at the website, you can click on the picture at the top, the heading, and it will provide you with the scripture, which you can print off. So we are here again to study, and we always begin by saying a blessing for God to bless us with His Word. Paul reminds us that in this blessing it states that we are sanctified by God's commandments, and it uses the word kadosh, which is holy. So we are set apart as His children, and we are set apart when we spend time studying. He included this morning the words from Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 7, which is the Shema, which says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might." And these words, I'm trying to get this to go down. There. Uh-oh. That's what happens when I can't see the rest of that. So y'all are just going to have to excuse me for a minute while I try to get this thing to go down. And then he also, and did it change up there to the?
Yeah.
Let's go down. That's what happens when it's behind my head too. He says, he also included Psalm 119:97, which says, "Oh, how I love your Torah. It is my meditation all the day." So as we prepare ourselves to study the Torah, again, we open with the blessing. So if you will join me in English, it says, "Blessed art thou, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with thy commandments, and commanded us to engross ourselves in the words of the Torah." And then in Hebrew, y'all would like for me to change it, or would you like to say that from memory? Here we go. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And you know, a lot of times I'm thinking I should be able to say that without looking at it, because we've said it so much, but sometimes there's a point there where my Texas brain gets in there and messes up the Hebrew. So I can understand having to watch that. He included in here from Psalm 119, verse 97, which says, where David says, "How I love your Torah. I meditate on it all day. I am wiser than my foes, because your mitzvah, your commandments, are mine forever." That's verses 97 and 98. And reminding us that as we study the Torah because we have time to study the Torah, and that we have our hearts directed toward his word and his guidance for us as we live out those words. Excuse me just a minute. I think I left something out. Y'all won't know whether I leave it out or not, will you? That's okay then. All right. So we are going to begin in chapter 21 of Leviticus, and I told Paul, he sent it to me to read before. I don't know what's
It says 23, Leviticus
I know,
23.
but that's not where, it's what it says here too, but that's not where we're supposed to be. So I don't know why he's there. Let me see where else. This is where we should be, because this is where we start. Okay. Last week was Akare Mot, which was after the death, which was the parsha that begins after Aaron's two sons were killed because of their disobedience. And so we learned there that it describes the tabernacle ceremony for the festival of the Day of Atonement, and we learned about the two goats and the part that those two goats play in that ceremony. And then there was a double portion. So we also had the second portion was Kedoshim. That was 29 and 30. And it's about holiness, and it's in there in Leviticus 19:2 it said, "You shall be holy, for I am the Lord your God. For I, the Lord your God, am holy." And so Leviticus 19 describes the holy community through a series of specific commandments. Leviticus 20 warns against the snares of sexual immorality and idolatry. Mandating a death penalty for certain sins. I found that interesting last week when it talks about these behaviors shall lead to death, and not only death spiritually, but a lot of times it was physical death by stoning, or I think what we see in our world these days is a physical death from the risks that are taken with being disobedient, and how that can be deadly to us. For me, those teachings are once again a verification that God's word is the same yesterday, today, tomorrow. It doesn't change. It doesn't matter if we're wearing turbans and long outfits, or if we're in jeans and boots. That the mankind's evolution, I guess you would call it, doesn't change. God's word is the same, and so when we as a people are disobedient, there is a price to pay, and until we as a people recognize that, I think of that, verse where he says, "Until my people humble themselves," and then we too will suffer the results of that disobedience. So those, as we study this, some people ask, why in the world do you go every year to the same part of the Old Testament? But there's always something in there that is pertinent to the time, and is a teaching point for all of us. So it's interesting to me that that there's a reason why we're there and why we study. So I always have to check what's it needs a rear view mirror here, doesn't it? We can see what's going on. Let's see if that changes. And it did. You have a copy of us of the Torah portion of scriptures, and we're going to start in Leviticus 21, and we'll read the first three of those portions that are listed, and then Paul left us some questions. So I'm going to look to see. Okay, I found it. All right. So we begin in chapter 21, verse 1. And the Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the priests, the sons of Aaron, and say to them, no one shall make himself unclean for the dead among his people, except for his closest relatives, his mother, his father, his son, his daughter, his brother, or his virgin sister, who is near to him because she has had no husband. For her he may make himself unclean. He shall not make himself unclean as a husband among his people, and so profane himself. They shall not make bald patches on their heads, nor shave off the edges of their beards, nor make any cuts on their body. They shall be holy to their God, and not profane the name of their God. For they offer the Lord's food offerings, the bread of their God, therefore they shall be holy. They shall not marry a prostitute or a woman who has been defiled, neither shall they marry a woman divorced from her husband, for the priest is holy to his God. You shall sanctify him, for he offers the bread of your God. He shall be holy to you, for I, the Lord, who sanctify you, am holy. And the daughter of any priest, if she profanes herself by whoring, profanes her father, she shall be burned with fire. The priest who is chief among his brothers, on whose head the anointing oil is poured, and who has been consecrated to wear the garments, shall not let the hair of his beard hang loose, nor tear his clothes. He shall not go into any dead bodies, nor make himself unclean, even for his father or for his mother. He shall not go out of the sanctuary, lest he profane the sanctuary of his God, for the consecration of the anointing oil of his God is on him. I am the Lord. And he shall take a wife in her virginity, a widow or a divorced woman, or a woman who has been defiled, or a prostitute. These he shall not marry. But he shall take as his wife a virgin of his own people, that he may not profane his offspring among his people. For I am the Lord who sanctifies him." And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron, saying, none of your offspring throughout their generations who has a blemish may approach to offer the bread of his God. For no one who has a blemish shall draw near, a man blind or lame, or one who has a mutilated face, or a limb too long, or a man who has an injured foot, or an injured hand, or a hunchback, or a dwarf, or a man with a defect in his sight, or an itching disease, or scabs, or crushed testicles. No man of the offspring of Aaron the priest who has a blemish shall come near to offer the Lord's food offerings. Since he has a blemish, he shall not come near to offer the bread of his God. He may eat the bread of his God, both of the most holy and of the holy things, but he shall not go through the veil or approach the altar, because he has a blemish, that he may not profane my sanctuaries. For I am the Lord who sanctifies them." So Moses spoke to Aaron and to his sons and to all the people of Israel. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron and his sons, so that they abstain from the holy things of the people of Israel, which they dedicate to me, so that they do not profane my holy name. I am the Lord. Say to them, if any one of all your offspring throughout your generations approaches the holy things that the people of Israel dedicate to the Lord, while he has an uncleanness, that person shall be cut off from my presence. I am the Lord. None of the offspring of Aaron who has a leprous disease or a discharge may eat of the holy things until he is clean. Whoever touches anything that is unclean through contact with the dead, or a man who has had an emission of semen, and whoever touches a swarming thing by which he may be made unclean, or a person from whom he may take uncleanness, whatever his uncleanness may be, the person who touches such a thing shall be unclean until the evening, and shall not eat the holy things unless he has bathed his body in water. When the sun goes down, he shall be clean, and afterward he may eat of the holy things, because they are his food. He shall not eat what dies of itself or is torn by beast, and so make himself unclean by it. I am the Lord. They shall therefore keep my charge, lest they bear sin for it and die thereby when they profane it. I am the Lord who sanctifies them. A lay person shall not eat of a holy thing. No foreign guest of the priest or hired worker shall eat of a holy thing. But if a priest buys a slave as his property for money, the slave may eat of it, and anyone born in his house may eat of his food. If a priest's daughter marries a layman, she shall not eat of the contribution of the holy things. But if a priest's daughter is widowed or divorced and has no child and returns to her father's house, as in her youth, she may eat of her father's food. Yet no layperson shall eat of it. And if anyone eats of a holy thing unintentionally, he shall add the fifth of its value to it and give the holy thing to the priest. They shall not profane the holy things of the people of Israel, which they contribute to the Lord, and so cause them to bear iniquity and guilt by eating their holy things. For I am the Lord who sanctifies them. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Aaron and his sons and all the people of Israel, and say to them, When any one of the house of Israel or of the sojourners in Israel presents a burnt offering as his offering for any of their vows or freewill offerings that they offer to the Lord, if it is to be accepted for you, it shall be a male without blemish of the bulls or the sheep or the goats. You shall not offer anything that has a blemish, for it will not be accepted for you. And when anyone offers a sacrifice of peace offerings, to the Lord to fulfill a vow, or as a freewill offering from the herd or from the flock, to be accepted it must be perfect. There shall be no blemish in it. Animals blind or disabled or mutilated or having a discharge or an itch or scabs you shall not offer to the Lord, or give them to the Lord as a food offering on the altar. You may present a bull or a lamb that has a part too long or too short for a free will offering, but for a vow offering it cannot be accepted. Any animal that has its testicles bruised or crushed or torn or cut you shall not offer to the Lord. You shall not do it within your land, neither shall you offer as the bread of your God any such animals gotten from a foreigner. Since there is a blemish in them because of their mutilation, they will not be accepted for you. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, When an ox or sheep or goat is born, it shall remain 7 days with its mother, and from the 8th day on it shall be acceptable as a food offering to the Lord. But you shall not kill an ox or a sheep and her young in 1 day. And when you sacrifice a sacrifice of thanksgiving to the Lord, you shall sacrifice it so that you may be accepted. For it shall be eaten on the same day. You shall leave none of it until morning. I am the Lord. So you shall keep my commandments and do them. I am the Lord. And you shall not profane my holy name, that I may be sanctified among the people of Israel. I am the Lord who sanctifies you, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord. And that was through portion number 3. And then he has these interesting questions. I told Paul, I said, my goodness, if you have to be gone, I said, you're going to be gone missing one of the really interesting ones. Of course, I don't know. They're all pretty interesting, so it would be hard to pick to be gone when you wouldn't miss something. So his first question, he says, what qualified someone to be a priest, a Cohen of Israel? I think I for a long time, for a long time, I knew nothing at all about the tabernacle or the temple or any of that service. But even starting this journey and beginning to learn some of those things, for me it was hard to determine who was a priest, who wasn't a priest, who could do this, who could do that. And so what finally I understand, because we've been over it a couple of times at least, that in order to be a Cohen, they had to be a direct descendant of Aaron. For a long time, my confusion was that they just had to be of the tribe of Levi, but it was more specific than that. So, Paul points out here that Aaron was the great grandson of Levi, and Levi being the third son of Jacob, and that Levi himself had three sons, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. But Aaron descended from Kohath. So the lineage of Aaron would be, he can trace it all the way back to Abraham. So you have Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Levi, Kohath, Amram, and then Aaron. And then all of Aaron's male descendants were regarded as Kohanim, and they had to be, and it's my understanding they're going to have to prove that again when we get to the third temple, however that comes about, that they'll have to prove that they're of that lineage, and now it's a much longer trace than it was then. But it says that they also had to be defect free. Isn't that interesting? And it's not just spiritually. They had to prove they were defect free spiritually, but they also had to be defect free physically. So no glasses. I'm assuming that would make you where you didn't qualify to be priest. And so, and I'm thinking, okay, then do scars count? Do cavities count? It gets kind of interesting. How far does physical perfection go? So
Cataracts.
Yeah. Or just I was trying to think of some disease, or something that you had always that you couldn't get rid of that wasn't severe, but I can't think of anything. But it's he points out in the word that the priest has to be perfect. It says, are Levites the same as priests? It says the Levites are descendants of Levi's two other sons, Gershom and Merari. All Kohanim are Levites, but not all Levites can be Kohanim. So it's all about where you were born in the family tree. And if you're born on the wrong branch, you can still serve, but you can't be a Kohanim. His next question says there are three classes within the structure of Jewish society. What are they?
Well, the Kohanim, the Levite, and then the common
people. Yeah. So, but isn't that interesting that you have this group that's really small, and then it gets to be a little bit larger group, and then you have this whole bunch of them that then become that third group of people. So, while every Levite is an Israelite, not every Israelite is part of the Levites or the priests. So, once again, it's just interesting that, we have this whole thing of people wanting to know their family tree and spending all this time doing strange things to figure out who they are and where they came from and what their lineage is and what their heritage is. But whatever I find out about my ancestors really doesn't have a whole lot to do with who I am or what I can be. It doesn't limit what I can do for work or as a job. But for the Israelites, the heritage is a really very specific and important thing. If your eyes are on the tabernacle or the temple and service there, you really do have to present your birth certificate, so to speak, and where you came from. We're going to move on to part number 4. Anybody feel like reading? You want to read, Deborah? Number 4.
The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, These are the appointed feasts of the Lord that you shall proclaim as holy convocations. They are my appointed feasts. 6 days shall work be done, but on the 7th day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no work. It is a Sabbath to the Lord in all your dwelling places. These are the appointed feasts of the Lord, the holy convocations which you shall proclaim at the time appointed for them. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at twilight, is the Lord's Passover, and on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread to the Lord. For 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall have a holy convocation. You shall not do any ordinary work, but you shall present a food offering to the Lord for 7 days. On the 7th day is a holy convocation. You shall not do any ordinary work. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, When you come into the land that I give you, and reap its harvest, you shall bring the sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest. And he shall wave the sheaf before the Lord, so that you may be accepted. On the day after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. And on the day when you wave the sheaf, you shall offer a male lamb 1 year old, without blemish, as a burnt offering to the Lord. And the grain offering with it shall be 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil, a food offering to the Lord with a pleasing aroma. And the drink offering with it shall be of wine, 1/4 of a hin. And you shall eat neither bread nor grain parched or fresh until this same day, until you have brought the offering of your God. It is a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. You shall count 7 full weeks from the day after the Sabbath. From the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, you shall count 50 days to the day after the 7th Sabbath. Then you shall present a grain offering of new grain to the Lord. You shall bring from your dwelling places 2 loaves of bread to be waved, made of 2/10 of an ephah. They shall be of fine flour, and they shall be baked with leaven, as firstfruits to the Lord. And you shall present with the bread 7 lambs 1 year old without blemish, and 1 bull from the herd, and 2 rams. They shall be a burnt offering to the Lord, with their grain offering and their drink offerings, a food offering with a pleasing aroma to the Lord. And you shall offer 1 male goat for a sin offering, and 2 male lambs 1 year old as a sacrifice of peace offerings. And the priest shall wave them with the bread of the firstfruits as a wave offering before the Lord with the 2 lambs. They shall be holy to the Lord for the priest. And you shall make a proclamation on the same day. You shall hold a holy convocation. You shall not do any ordinary work. It is a statute forever in all your dwelling places and throughout your generations. And when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge, nor shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and the sojourner. I am the Lord your God.
So we've moved into chapter 23 of Leviticus, which lines out for the children, including us, how to keep those moedim, how to keep those special appointed times of the Lord. part of our discussion when we were looking at the sacrifices and how those are to be carried out and how to keep those holy, what we discovered was that all of those instructions were to provide a way for the children to draw closer to God, to worship Him, to hear what pleased Him, and to take care of those things that would line them up, that would put them in position to be children of God. And so, what we discover when we get to chapter 23 of Leviticus is there are some instructions about how to celebrate. I want to have this celebration. I want you to draw close to me in this celebration time, and this is how that can happen. And that's true for us too. Of course, a lot of the things we're no longer able to do those anyway, because they're, like we just looked at some information about some sacrifices that are part of these Moedim, and those are not things that we can participate in, or that there's even a place for those to happen. But there is still an air of holiness and specific instruction in order for all of God's children to celebrate in a way that is pleasing to Him and allows us to draw nigh to Him, to draw near. So we're gonna move on to number 5, which says, "And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the people of Israel," which I started to go back through and count how many times "speak" was in there. And I didn't do that. I didn't think of it again until this morning, because of course that's the title of this Torah portion, is Emor. So that it's interesting that if I had to remember that there was a point where God spoke to all of them. And then it terrified the children to such an extent that they said to Moses, "Let God talk to you, and then you come tell us." Because then I'm thinking, well, that would have been quite a happening if you were standing at the foot, and you're not even close to the mountain, really, you're back when God spoke. And just imagine what that did. I mean, it just shook the whole earth and your poor body, and you just fell flat on your face because you were so in awe of that. So I can understand where they would say, let God talk to you and then you talk to us. And so in this particular portion, that's what He's doing. God is giving the instructions to Moses, and then He says, "Speak to the children. You go tell them," because they want to listen to you, and that's fine, because He knew that Moses would be faithful to take that message. So He says, "Speak to the people of Israel, saying, In the 7th month, on the 1st day of the month, you shall observe a day of solemn rest, a memorial proclaimed with blast of trumpet, a holy convocation. You shall not do any ordinary work, and you shall present a food offering to the Lord." And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Now on the 10th day of this 7th month is the day of atonement. It shall be for you a time of holy convocation, and you shall afflict yourselves and present a food offering to the Lord. And you shall not do any work on that very day, for it is a day of atonement, to make atonement for you before the Lord your God. For whoever is not afflicted on that very day shall be cut off from his people. And whoever does any work on that very day, that person I will destroy from among his people. You shall not do any work. It is a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwelling places. It shall be to you a Sabbath of solemn rest, and you shall afflict yourselves. On the 9th day of the month, beginning at evening, from evening to evening, shall you keep your Sabbath. And then in the 6th part it says, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the people of Israel, saying, on the 15th day of this 7th month, and for 7 days is the feast of booths to the Lord. On the 1st day shall be a holy convocation. You shall not do any ordinary work. For 7 days you shall present food offerings to the Lord. On the 8th day you shall hold a holy convocation and present a food offering to the Lord. It is a solemn assembly. You shall not do any ordinary work. These are the appointed feasts of the Lord, which you shall proclaim as times of holy convocation, for presenting to the Lord food offerings, burnt offerings, and grain offerings, sacrifices and drink offerings, each on its proper day. Besides the Lord's Sabbaths, and besides your gifts, and besides all your vow offerings, and besides all your free will offerings, which you give to the Lord. On the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have gathered in the produce of the land, you shall celebrate the feast of the Lord 7 days. On the 1st day shall be a solemn rest, and on the 8th day shall be a solemn rest. And you shall take on the 1st day the fruit of splendid trees, branches of palm trees, and boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God 7 days. You shall celebrate it as a feast to the Lord for 7 days in the year. It is a statute forever throughout your generations. You shall celebrate it in the 7th month. You shall dwell in the booths for 7 days. All native Israelites shall dwell in booths, that your generations may know that I made the people of Israel dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Thus Moses declared to the people of Israel the appointed feast of the Lord.
A while ago you were talking about, we don't have the temple, we don't have the altars, we can't offer the sacrifices physically like that because it's done and over with. But in Romans 1, Paul says we are to offer ourselves as a living sacrifice, as an act of worship. So we offer what we have within our hearts and our minds to be transformed by our minds.
Absolutely.
And so we can go ahead
And we
and
do
observe
have that,
those.
yes.
But when he comes back, it'll be interesting how
the animal sacrifice lines up with Ben.
well, yes, but I don't
Especially
think it'll be a sin sacrifice because he's already
Right,
paid that.
but those
But
yeah.
But there's a lot
But peace
of
offerings.
others.
peace offerings
Peace
and the
offerings.
thank offerings.
Thank
and
offerings,
oh
the-
yes.
Yes.
And he said, and if Egypt does not come and worship me and bring the offerings, they get no rain.
Yeah.
And I imagine that might affect other nations too. That may not.
Well, you know what I found interesting, and Paul has some stuff we'll get to, but I guess this was the first time I had really paid attention to the fact that on the Day of Atonement, if anyone who doesn't chastise themselves is can be put to death. And I'm just like, okay, that's pretty serious for, that, but it was, so whatever they did had to be something that was public. I mean, what the participation in it had to be something that it wasn't that they just stayed inside and shelter in place and do what they were asked to do.
The thing about studying this year that's hit me, maybe more so, and every year it's something else God's working me on, is everything is public for them.
Mhm.
They didn't get the little cover over everything they did. That when a priest sinned,
The whole world.
Everybody
Yeah.
knew.
I mean, but
Uh-huh.
people too.
Yeah.
You didn't get the thing. Well, I'll just keep it to myself, or I won't. If you sinned, you had to do the
Public thing.
restoration of
Yeah.
putting it back like it should have been. And he also, I think, this year is going. Our offerings are really important to him. He says,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hit me. It's not just something you can gloss over. It's not. He says, just don't come.
Yeah.
Just don't come. And so, what is your offering? Well, we are the priesthood. So, what should your offering be?
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's not the money or the,
It could be. I mean,
yeah,
I think it's all of it.
but mostly it's a heart thing, like we've talked about so many times, like you said. If you're not going to come with that clean and ready to worship, then don't come at all. Because it's that verse, that Proverbs verse that Paul uses all the time now. If you're not going to be obedient, if you're not going to read Torah, then I'm not even going to listen to your prayer.
No, it is strong.
That's the one that hits, because
Because
it's
you're
like,
forgiven.
wow, yeah. Well, now traditionally the Jews say that prayers are the sacrifice. That because you can't sacrifice, that none of those sacrifices, even like grain offerings and those things, are not to be offered somewhere other than, where God has put His name. But their whole focus on prayer is that is the sacrifice. That's the only sacrifice I can make right now, is to offer this prayer, and those prayers are the incense. That's the aroma for God that blesses Him. Is that those prayers of and I think it's Psalm 51 in it where David says, please give me a clean heart, Lord.
But you know what? He said, don't bring me something that cost you nothing.
No.
Right.
And when he told them, he was requiring them to examine themselves. He was requiring them to say, bring the best lamb you have.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't say, well, take the last $5 and put it in the plate. He said, it's going to cost you.
Yeah.
It did.
Mhm.
And I think it's because he wants our priorities to be about him and about his kingdom.
Mhm.
And we have made it so about how does this relate to me? How does this make this better for me? If I go to that church, what can it do for me? Or if I do this, instead
How
of
good do I look? That's all.
it's just working on me this year about
Yeah.
where I should be, in the relationship. And then I'm going to Hebrews a lot right now, and the scripture that says, let us hold on to the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful, and let us be concerned about one another in order to promote love and good works, not staying away from our meeting, as some habitually do, but encouraging each other all the more as you see the day drawing near. The day's drawing near.
Oh yeah.
Very
Yeah.
closely.
I just don't know how to get this all.
Oh well, yeah. Well, and that's why that's why it gives us these pieces at different points in our journey, is because the whole picture is so big that it's like can't be grasped, all of it. I think too about that, when we studied about offerings in those great big urns that were probably copper urns, and that made a noise when people threw their coins in there. So for some of them, then that was, I'm going to put a lot in there so it'll make a big noise. And then the focus was on the widow who had those two tiny little coins that were probably smaller than pennies. So when hers went in, that was the noise that Yeshua heard. You didn't hear the big clanging of giant amounts of coins. He heard everything she had.
That's what I was going to say. It was huge sacrifice for her.
Everything. And as small as it was, when it fell through there, the noise was probably very faint and very light. But that's what reached his ears. So, it's that it ties then to, for me, to 1 Corinthians 13. Am I going to be that clanging noise, that loud noise that may or may not mean that anything sacrificial has really come from me?
Like
Or-
a still small voice.
Right. Or is it going to be something that's worthy of that? That's something that was really important to me. He, I'm cracking up on his questions, y'all. I'm sorry you don't have this. Some of these are amusing. But he's like, can you list the 8 appointed times listed in Leviticus 23? And the reason that makes me laugh is because a few years ago, the answer would have been no. I wouldn't have even known what you were talking about, much less been able to list them. But, Alvin's done a great job of teaching us every year back through those as we live those, because then that experience also ties to the things that God has told us to do. I think one of the, I'm supposed to step through this. Did it change to that little guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
The feast of the Lord.
I know. I think that's a great picture. I'm just like, I don't know. That guy's a little strange looking, but the fact that he's got that sheaf in his hand is really interesting. I think that's not the one I want. Okay. The interesting thing every year for me is, or one of the interesting things, is that the first one he talks about in Leviticus 23, which is lining everything up for us, is the Sabbath. And that's interesting to me too, because it's every week. Every week, God invites us to join him in a special day. And it's, I know that when I first started, it was all about, can I get all of this right? Can I get this done?
No.
And am I going to forget and do something I'm not supposed to? And, oh dear, does that not count then as having celebrated that Sabbath? But see, that's our Western mindset, is especially if you're a left-brain person who makes a list of things and you've got all these do's and don'ts. And it takes a while, I think, before, or it did in my brain, it's not about the do's and the don'ts. It's about the time spent. And so, it may be that just saying, I want to learn this, and please show me what to do and what not to do. Because I will tell you, I forget, especially, have you just lost track of time, what day of the week it is, and this whole pandemic thing, and sometimes I'm like, shoot, I don't even know.
What day it is.
No, but the good thing was that at least Torah Study and then the live stream of that afternoon at least marked the day, where the other days then sort of fell into place. But without that as an anchor, I think I'd have had to have been marking it off of a calendar or something just to keep up with that. But that's the whole thing, is that too is our mindset of keeping track of the days of the week and what day in the calendar it is. And I think life for them moved at a different pace and in a different way, and a bunch of shofar blowing, to mark those times when they came together and celebrated. But it's always, every time we get to this, because I don't think I pay attention on a weekly basis
I think
of how
that's-
blessed we are to have that.
I think it'd be easier back then in the wilderness. They were all doing the same thing at the same time. But I think in a way too, it might be easier to be living in Israel, because basically it'd be the same thing, same time. Whereas over here, we're rather unusual. in celebrating Shabbat on
Yeah.
Saturday. Others are out and about doing, and I think in a way it's maybe we do have to have a little bit more of a conscious
Intent.
mindset to do it, because we're not of the world, but we are in it, and the world is around us doing world things, and I think we do kind of have to
Set it aside
apart.
intentionally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pay attention. And for me, that's a good thing too, to have it where it's different from everyone else around me, so that I do mark that, because, one of the things I think Alvin has taught us is that that's what these are all for. They're to mark times, to mark special times where we separate from, because, they became part of the world also. The world was around them. God separated them so he could teach them, which I think is what he has to do with me a lot of times, is put me somewhere where I'll listen and pay attention. So when I was reading this, I also thought about how Sunday, the blue laws we used to have on Sunday. And the intent of those was the same thing. It was some man's idea of following God's pattern, but making it a different pattern. Because, we can't do what God says. We're going to do what we want done. But that's how it was when I grew up. There was no place to go. I don't know. We never ate out anyway, but I don't know if there were restaurants open on Sundays or not. But you couldn't go to the grocery store. So you better not run out of milk, because there was not going to be any place to get milk. So, it became a set apart time for everyone, because whether you believe that way or not, you couldn't find a grocery store. So, it's like this when he's talking to Israel, he's talking to the bloodline children and the sojourners, those who chose to follow and become a part of Israel. And he says, this is how you need to look. This is what you need to show the world, is that by your behavior. And this one is every week. Every week I want them to see that you are working for 6 days, and then on that 7th day that there is no work. And I always think about that, where the one man, and it's like, a lot of other things where an important teaching, the person doesn't have a name. And this guy I'm sure his relatives are glad he's not named, where he went out to collect firewood on kindling on the Sabbath. And, when I first read that story, I thought, whoa, what? Because did he just lose track of time and he just didn't realize it was Shabbat? But the teaching is that the man did it in rebellion. He did it intentionally. And it was like shaking his fist at God. So, when he was put to death, that was the message. This is a holy God you serve. And if you decide not to follow him, well, that is the choice you have. But if you do so with that attitude of I'm my own God and I reject you, then it can be costly. So, and I think of all the years, and I know many of you have had those many years when I did not keep Shabbat, didn't know about. It may have been a run through, but there was nothing in my mind that caused it to be a remembrance, and it didn't bring death into my life as far as physical death. But I think there was a lot of spiritual death that accompanied that, even though, my mother had me at church every time the doors were open. So there was a lot of teaching and learning that occurred. but there was also a lot of things that weren't. There are a lot of gaps that were not intentional on her part, but because of her own teaching and training. So, the fact that the Father is so loving and gracious and says, once you know, then the choice for me was like, how important is this going to be? And are you going to follow this, or are you going to reject it and shake your fist at God? So,
and I think too, there's the heart attitude. God loveth a cheerful giver. How many people, today I can't do this or can't do that. It's Sabbath, it's Shabbat, it's be glad when Monday comes or something. I think it's a hard attitude that he loves, and he wants us to love what he loves, and he loves Shabbat. He blesses. It's the only one he really blessed was that day, and to me, I love Shabbat. I loved it from day one when we started it. Couldn't wait till the evening I could sit down and it's Shabbat. I think it's a lot of heart set too. And that man that went out to get the kindling, he didn't have that heart set.
Well, he had a heart set,
but it's the wrong way.
Not one that was going to do him any good. That was for sure. So, but I think that and then and I think back when we start looking at these feasts, when we how many feasts are there? Were 7? No, there's 8. And then how many times that Alvin has pointed out in his teaching that we see that in other places in the scripture where there are these 7 things. No, wait, there's 8. And so that our attention is drawn to those important things that God wants to share with us. And it's always important. And I learned this more as we travel, that those connections, those threads that go from Genesis to Revelation, where there are so many things that are cyclical, that repeat themselves in the same way, and that those are intentional. Those weren't just happenstance. Those things God did on purpose so that our little feeble brains could line up with those things and make those connections. So we have that feast where we meet every week and celebrate that time that God has given us to put aside the things of the world and to come draw near to Him and say, teach me something today. Teach me something special today. Help me to learn to rest.
And I think too, as the Sabbath, and like the man going out on the Sabbath together, he should have prepared ahead of time.
Yeah.
Just like, the bread, the manna. You picked up enough double portion on before to cover the Sabbath. So they knew that.
Yes.
And it was a preparation throughout the week. You're preparing throughout the week for the Sabbath.
Yes.
It's not just, it's Sabbath, I've got to do that, wake up that.
Well, and if you do, you're not going to have any kindling, huh, Gary?
That's right.
Because you haven't prepared.
You haven't prepared, but you should do that day one.
Well, and two, that God has made that provision.
Yes, He has.
You've got these 6 days because on that 7th day, I want your attention, and I don't want to, what he tells me is I don't want to share you with the grocery store or, shopping or whatever else. I started to say football, and I thought that could get me in trouble. But I don't want to share your time with anything else that the world offers. So he's made that special time.
There was a time when I was TA for Dr. Davis's classes, and another lady and I were working on a project for her, and she said, "Now comes Shabbat. I'm not going to be working on this. I do not do any computers or any of that thing on Shabbat." And I related that as well to Anne. I said, you know, that's off, or we're not gonna be working on projects and doing computer stuff and being on the computer on Shabbat. And she said, oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know, she was on board with us on that.
Yeah.
But there are distractions. You know, the TV, the computer, you know, there are distractions. And like you said, he's really not wanting to share that. But hey, you know, we did the golf thing and you know, all that. But now that it's all been shut down, it's been really interesting. I mean, it just you do focus a little bit better without all the other
Without
stuff.
the distraction.
Just stuff.
There is a prohibition against kindling a fire on Shabbat too, and I think that his gathering firewood was indicative of the precondition of not having the right heart attitude anyway.
Right. Yeah, and don't let anything. They tell me that in Israel you're not even supposed to flip a light switch.
Or use the elevator or something.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm not on an elevator a lot, but somebody had told me about that light switch thing, so every time I throw a light switch at home, I'm just like, but you know, our life is so different that, you know, I mean, I just don't even think about what might be considered work because we don't consider it work.
I wondered if kindling a fire was more like starting something by talking, you know, kindling it, getting somebody angered or heated up.
Yeah, that could be.
I don't know, but it could be
Boy,
that too.
that's a thought.
Yeah.
In a spiritual sense, yeah, kindling the tongue, the fire.
Getting somebody all riled up.
Isn't it interesting how much of our lives are tied into a computer or an iPad or a phone, and how I mean, I don't know about you, I just know about me, but that I don't even think about that usually, you know, and when somebody mentions setting all of that aside, I would have to really think through each thing I did, because there's so many times I'm like, well, I need to look that up, and I'll start looking up something, you know. So it becomes that habit that I don't leave behind on Shabbat, which is something to think about. Something big to think about, huh? So then we move to, oops, I didn't move. When I move. The next one Paul shows us is the Passover, and we've just celebrated that season, which was not only different for us, but very different. I mean, if you watch any of the pictures that came from Israel about Passover in Israel this year, they were all saying how different it was, and how the biggest difference that they noticed was not being able to meet with family, not being able to celebrate in the way that they were used to celebrating. Still celebrated, and still looking forward to the next time that they can gather as a family and celebrate, because these feasts become family times, and they are for us too. They are for us as a church family, even if we're not able to pull our earthly family in. And again, it still is that marker. It is that marker to the world that no matter what the shutdown is, what the shelter in place is, that, you know, the festival is, I mean, God didn't say, oh, you know, Passover's on hold this year because y'all are all confined to your homes. It was, you meet me, and you meet me however and wherever, and you and I will celebrate. So, you know, this, again, a very timely lesson for me, in the situation that we are in, that God doesn't change, and He doesn't change because, you know, our world's gone crazy. He just says, if you're going to be crazy if you walk with them, so just, you know, pull away, and stay with me and let the crazy run its course, which it will anyway. So we have Passover, and another one that's always interesting for me because every year I learn more about the Feast of Unleavened Bread and how to keep it personally. The very first year, I think it was Brenda talking about going through her house and cleaning out everything with leaven and reading all the boxes, that had, and I'm like, are you kidding me?
Oh, yeah.
And then it was like, okay, so I was really working hard at trying to do that and putting some of it out in the garage, and then it wasn't far enough. It was in the garage, and so and it was like, and then you read about where the Jewish people hire somebody to buy their leavened stuff until the end of leavened bread,
And then buy it back.
I'm going, Lord, really? I mean, I'm just, because our list of items that have leaven in them is been beyond that. So, then our teaching here evolved to, you get rid of the leaven in your life. You spend time looking at what is it in my life that prevents me from getting close to God, and work on getting that leaven out rather than all the bread products out, which I always forgot to look in the freezer anyway. So then you open the freezer and go, oh no. It's like out of sight, out of mind. Does that work?
Yep.
So it's unleavened bread is interesting.
Well, I did the unleavened, with the baking powder and all that stuff when I first did it. And then, I don't know, I came to the conclusion they didn't have baking powder sort of out in the wilderness. He talked about yeast.
Yeah.
And I know in some of the Jewish things that it's beans and rice and anything that
Flour.
and I'm going, I'll look for anything that has yeast, and I'm just not going to worry about the baking powder because it's a chemical. It's not live. Yeast is live.
Well, and then
And the yeast in us.
then you
is
read
live.
where it's in the air, and you're like,
Yeah, what do you do then?
how's that gonna work? No, you can't stop breathing for.
Well, then they call it leavening agent in some things, and it is the chemical anyway, but they call it leavening agent. So, oh great, they got the word.
Yeah, so I was very grateful to the teaching of look for the sin in your life, and sometimes it is that very particle kind of stuff where there's some little something that I keep hanging on to and participating in that Yahweh would like for me to get rid of, and that's a season where examining is very important, and not that probably I'm going to cure it in that week, but it does become something on my list of things that I'm working on, those things that I'm working through that feast.
I also think that you should have really taught too to get the false teachings out of your, as far as people and teachings that you have followed that bring you to sin
Yeah.
because you're following false teachings.
Yes, and you don't know that it's false, but once you do, so if you're examining it, if you're examining those teachers, you will find that, won't you?
Because there's lots of people that want to hold on to, like, just as far as denominations that will be very against like different things of the Catholic Church. But then there's other things with the Catholic Church that they want to hold on to, like Sunday
Tradition, yeah, something that feels good, but the others don't necessarily.
That's good.
But that could even be true within our own family here, huh? And making sure, like Alvin's always telling us to be good Bereans and to check and make sure that his teaching and everyone else's is lining up with what's taught. I think that's kind of tricky too, and that now that we've started looking at different translations and how different words are translated in different ways, and talking about how no matter how hard a translator tries, that personal belief is going to get in there, no matter how hard they try to prevent it. So it's my job to weed through that and see if it's supported.
And Hebrew roots, I think a lot of it is you end up going into some of the traditional Jewish teachings,
Yeah.
where they put fences around everything. And we gotta get out of that mindset too.
Yeah, and that whole arguing who's right and who's wrong, and whether the barley's ripe or not, and what day it was raising its little head or it's falling over, and I'm just like, oh my, how can that honor the Father if we're gonna argue over, the grain? So, I don't know where we are. We're still there. All right. The next one, of course, is the Feast of First Fruits. I remember the very first year of First Fruits, and the waving of the loaves in the sanctuary, and it was just so different from anything I'd ever done in my little Church of Christ Baptist background. It was like, wow! So, you come from there and you're just like, I can't believe this. I can't believe we're at Freedom Baptist Church and we're, if you're waving this loaf of bread, homemade loaf from Kimberly's wheat that she raised. So it was just, it was a very interesting experience, and it will be one of those memories forever. But
By the shofar blowing.
Yes.
You don't hear shofars on Sunday church.
No.
I love the shofars.
It is. It's gorgeous. It's fun. But those are things, that I'm grateful that God has given us those times to share those together, so we have those memories. We are now counting the Omer. And so we are in the Feast of Weeks, and I'm anticipating that, and that's another thing I think that Alvin has taught us in his teaching, is that's the whole point of counting the Omer, is to build that anticipation, looking forward to that 50th day when we know on that day that there were a lot of there are several things that are markers that that God gave us His Torah on that day, that God gave us the Holy Spirit that day, and so we have those markers to celebrate those times together. And then of course we have trumpets. We just, trumpets is always amazing, and I think for us, part of those celebrations are at the canyon, because of that being such a beautiful expression of God's love for us by offering us a place where we like that we could celebrate. So we have trumpets. We talked last week about the Day of Atonement, and unless my heart's in the right place with that one, that's not something that if I'm walking with the world, that day's not gonna come out the way that it should. So, the more we learn, the more I learn, the more important that celebration is. And then of course we have Tabernacles, which is always the joy and delight, like it's the crowning jewel, and I think it's intended to be that way. I think that even when we look at atonement and the seriousness of what's supposed to happen at that time, that God still gave us these as jewels, as times of joy and times of celebration.
And it was like Alvin said the other day when we had Passover, even though we looked forward to the tabernacles, you can't have tabernacles unless you have Passover, and Passover is wonderful. I love Passover, but you can't have or any of it without the. Well, you probably could maybe have Day of Atonement, but still, it's all
We could do that.
like daily.
Uh,
But even on Day of Atonement, not only it's the searching and the confessing, but I think it's, for me too, it's a day of rejoicing and worship because of what He has
yes.
done for us. And it's like
Yes.
we can go from the atonement into the redemption on that day of what He's done for us.
And I don't know where everyone else is on this, but this counting this year is just like the anticipation is.
I know.
Looking
Huge.
for
I mean, 'cause
something
with
big.
everything going on, it's like I don't know. It's like I know I can't do it without.
Yeah,
You know, the things and
yeah.
all the deceptions and all just everything. It's just like without Him showing us.
It's just going to get to a bigger mess without
So
God.
I've been discussed several things lately about the fact that all of this, since we started this walk, we said there's going to be a line in the sand. That was one of the biggest things. But I think it's getting to be bigger and deeper, and you are going to be different. The ones that are called, and you're going to be desperately listening, but the line in the sand is going to get more and more evident.
I think you're right. When we very first started this walk, I would forget about the counting the Omer. I mean, just hadn't ever really heard of or anything and didn't do it. And then when I did hear about it, I'd still forget to mark. This year, I've done pretty good in getting it marked because there is something
Coming.
Yeah, there's something.
there's I don't know if anyone saw on my Facebook that I posted that pastor in California. They've been told 5 to 6 months before the churches will be able to meet. And the Lord gave him the 31st of May. And so he's asking for all the churches to open for Pentecost Sunday. At the time, he didn't know that that's what it was.
Isn't that amazing?
Looked, that's what it was.
That is amazing.
That is amazing.
But just think if all the churches across America
And
the world
and recognize
would
recognize
would
what
come
is
together.
what was going
Yeah.
on.
And what I found interesting too, last year the rabbis in Israel were talking to the diaspora, those who are out, get to Israel. You've got to make Aliyah to Israel. You've got to do it this year. And then when it got closer, they became more adamant. If you're going to come, you've got to come because it's going to close. Well, look what happened. Airlines are down.
Yeah.
We're kind of getting close to the 0 hour, so I want to finish reading from 7, and then there are a few more questions that Paul has for us to consider. We're into chapter 24 now, and it's when I was reading this, I thought, how I personally sort of ignore chapter 24 because chapter 23 is a big deal, and then 24. But it really is again part of the whole picture. So it becomes as important as is all the rest of it. So this year I'm trying to pay more attention to chapter 24. The Lord spoke to Moses saying, command. Okay, now he said, say to them. Now he says, command. Command the people of Israel to bring you pure oil from beaten olives for the lamp, that a light may be kept burning regularly. Outside the veil of the testimony in the tent of meeting, Aaron shall arrange it from evening to morning, which is backward for us, before the Lord regularly. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations. He shall arrange the lamps on the lampstand of pure gold before the Lord regularly. You shall take fine flour and bake 12 loaves from it. 2/10 of an ephah shall be in each loaf, and you shall set them in 2 piles, 6 in a pile on the table of pure gold before the Lord. And you shall put pure frankincense on each pile, that it may go with the bread as a memorial portion, as a food offering to the Lord. Every Sabbath day Aaron shall arrange it before the Lord regularly. It is from the people of Israel as a covenant forever. And it shall be for Aaron and his sons, and they shall eat it in a holy place, since it is for him a most holy portion out of the Lord's food offerings, a perpetual due. Now an Israelite woman's son, whose father was an Egyptian, went out among the people of Israel. And the Israelite woman's son and a man of Israel fought in the camp. And the Israelite woman's son blasphemed the name and cursed. Then they brought him to Moses. His mother's name was Shelomith, the daughter of Dibri, the wife of the tribe of Dan. And they put him in custody till the will of the Lord should be clear to them. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Bring out of the camp the one who cursed, and let all who heard him lay their hands on his head, and let all the congregation stone him. And speak to the people of Israel, saying, Whoever curses his God shall hear his sin. Whoever blasphemes the name of the Lord shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him, the sojourner as well as the native. When he blasphemes the name shall be put to death. Whoever takes a human life shall surely be put to death. Whoever takes an animal's life shall make it good, life for life. If anyone injures his neighbor as he has done it, shall be done to him. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Whatever injury he has given a person shall be given to him. Whoever kills an animal shall make it good, and whoever kills a person shall be put to death. You shall have the same rule for the sojourner and for the native, for I am the Lord your God. So Moses spoke to the people of Israel, and they brought out of the camp the one who had cursed, and stoned him with stones. Thus the people of Israel did as the Lord commanded Moses. I'm a little concerned that they gave the mother's name and they kept the son anonymous. But, to me it was like a picture of somewhere he had not learned.
Accountability.
Yeah. And she was the mother, and she was the teacher, and she was responsible for his understanding, is the way I looked at it. And the father, wasn't he Egyptian?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so there was no way that he could be held accountable because he probably didn't know. Of course, marrying him would have placed her in a precarious place anyway. So, but how sad, my mother's heart went crushed, because how sad to not only watch that happen to your son, but it's forever. He is forever the example of what happens if you choose to curse the father. One thing to turn away from him, an entirely different level of accountability to curse the father. One question here, what kind of oil was required for the menorah in the tabernacle?
Frankincense.
Pure olive oil.
Pure olive oil. Yeah, the frankincense was put on the bread. Do you find that interesting?
I didn't ever catch that.
Well, I think this is the first time I've noticed it, because frankincense is so strong, and I can't imagine eating it.
Maybe they put it in some olive oil.
And made that little dish of stuff you dip the bread in. But I just
anointed the bread with it.
Yes.
Remember, the bread wasn't eaten for a week, though.
Yeah.
So you think that would have calmed it down?
Maybe it sifted down through the stacks.
I'm
and
sure
wasn't
it-
quite so
Maybe
strong.
it,
But
I don't
it's
know.
Kept the mold away.
Maybe
That's what I think too.
Maybe it preserved it.
Oh.
Frankincense
It
is
preserved
very
it.
healing.
Yeah.
The rabbis say that after a week of it sitting there
It
in
was
the
still
open,
okay.
they ate it. It was just like it came out of the oven.
Well, that would be a miracle, wouldn't it?
Would be good.
Oh.
Are you
That's
saying
a
that
Jewish
her was
tradition.
overcooked?
And
I
might
like
have been,
it.
but it could have been.
Well, I
Saying it
think
was
this is the
overcooked.
first time I've ever noticed that too, and it's because I've experienced this,
What'd you say?
that pungent smell of frankincense, and I just could not get thinking, how in the world? But, you know, it's like everything else. If that's what you were used to, if that was the flavor and the odor, the smell that you were used to, especially when it was connected with that whole act of worship, then it probably would be
Who
very
ate
different.
it? The priest.
Yeah,
And I think it had a health
it
connotation.
probably did.
I do.
It probably did. Kept some of those.
Maybe it kept the gnats and flies away.
Well,
We could spray everything down with frankincense down at the canyon.
It's expensive.
Keep the flies gone.
Costly.
And then here, Paul had this question about bread. I mean,
we got it.
yeah. We're joking. This is interesting. In Jewish tradition, who is given the first aliyah when reading from the Torah during a synagogue service? And
Read
it's
that, say that
it's
again.
it says, who is given the first aliyah, the first portion, when reading from the Torah during a synagogue service?
We don't know.
So in a synagogue service, a Cohen is given that right. If a Cohen is not present, the honor goes to a Levite. If a Levite's not present, you would look for an Israelite, and so on down to you got to just a common person, I guess, who could read.
That's Gagum Samaritans.
Yeah.
Do it again.
Carmen San Diego.
Says, what does Hilul Hashem mean?
Hallelujah to the name.
Well, it's Chillul. Hilul. Can't get that quite going.
You gotta get this light down there.
Yeah, because it means the desecration of God's name,
Oh, okay.
caused by blasphemy or bringing God's name into disrepute, which is what the man did. And the opposite of Hilul Hashem is Kadush Hashem,
Yeah.
sanctifying the name, which sometimes can involve martyrdom.
Wow. Bill Cloud's whole thing was on that.
Oh, yeah.
On this portion, he said the whole thing is about not that how we pronounce the name, which we got hung up on, not all that, but that how holy he is and how accountable we are to him, and how it's
And if you're going to use the name,
sentence to dishonor who he is. Yeshua was a representation of he came in the name.
yeah,
We should be coming in the name.
whoa.
It's huge.
He's a Kohen,
Whoa.
the priest, the high priest. He is our high priest.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Listen to he who comes.
All right. Well, we are now to Calvin. Interesting. Calvin says he's got a little remorse going on there. I feel bad that I called Susie names and hurt her feelings. Wonder how long that lasted. I can't read that. I'm sorry I did it. He looks sorry. Here's the advice of the sage in the cartoon. Maybe you should apologize to her. I keep hoping there's
That's so true.
yes.
Just be nice to
How many of you have a hard time apologizing? Man, that was a skill I had to really work on for mostly because I was really good at sarcasm. I thought it was
Excellent tool.
It's funny when it does like
I thought it was one of those things you wanted to develop, and when you got really good at stabbing people with it, it was like, hooray. Well, then, God convicted me. That is like murder, okay? That is like you trying to kill somebody with your words. And so then it's a habit you have to break, which is so hard. So then I had to learn how to apologize, which, Cause pride is one of those things
Yeah.
that just, and you just can't
Makes
be,
you fall on your face.
you can't be a proud person and apologize. I guess he put all of Psalm 119 on here for us.
Oh.
Is what the last page is.
Oh.
So, cause I was looking at that going,
We don't have that. We don't have that.
you don't have that page?
No, I
No.
want that thing.
Oh, well, I have one copy, so y'all can,
Oh, somebody. Maybe
well,
they-
I don't know, I
I
don't know.
could take it home.
I don't know
copy it
why
off
you
and
put
bring
it
back
on
next
his
week.
and not anybody else's. Why do you think
Wow.
that? I don't know. He'll
They're
tell us when we come back.
That's
Who's special? We are. Paul is. Okay, next week, Behar on the mountain. And we're getting close to the end of Leviticus, so. Okay, well, I thank you all for coming and we'll say the blessing together and we'll be ready to emerge into the world. Blessed art thou, Lord our God, King of the universe, who gave us the Torah of truth, Yeshua our Messiah, and set everlasting life in our midst. Blessed art thou, O Lord, giver of the Torah. And then in Hebrew, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, Yeshua Meshachenu, v'ha'id olam netah betokenu, Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah. Great peace have those who love your law. Nothing can make them stumble. The way of the wicked is like darkness. They do not know what makes them stumble. You know, that that verse comes to my head when Nancy Pelosi's face pops up. Because I really don't, I think she's in such deep darkness that the evil and the hatred that she spews, she doesn't know she's in that darkness. Sorry to.
Gary and I started praying for their salvation because we feel like that